The indispensable asset. You've been with us for 23 years, Margaret. Surely you understand that Westfield Financial needs to evolve, said Director Carson Phillips, not bothering to make eye contact as he reviewed the documents on his tablet. The younger analysts bring fresh perspectives, new technologies. We need to stay competitive. I maintained my composure, though the dismissive tone in his voice ignited a familiar spark of indignation. After more than 2 decades managing the firm's most valuable client relationships, I was being pushed aside by a man 15 years my junior who had been with the company for barely 18 months. I understand evolution, Carson. What I don't understand is why the Miller portfolio is being reassigned when I've grown their assets by 14% annually for the past decade. Carson sighed dramatically, finally looking up. Margaret, the Millers have expressed interest in our digital investment platform. Aiden has exceptional experience with the system. It simply makes sense to transition them to someone more technically aligned. Beside him, Aiden Nichols nodded with practiced sympathy, though his eyes revealed the triumph he clearly felt. At 32, he had charmed his way through the ranks with his MIT credentials and carefully cultivated relationships with the board members. His strategy of gradually absorbing my high-value clients had been systematic and unmistakable. Besides, Carson continued, we're not asking you to leave. Your institutional knowledge remains valuable. We're simply refocusing your role to better serve the company's direction. Translation: we're stripping you of your client base and relegating you to administrative work until you get the message and retire. I see, I replied, my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. And my refocus role involves what exactly? Carson shifted uncomfortably. You'll be handling compliance documentation and client orientation materials. Your attention to detail will be most valuable there. I almost laughed. From managing $1.2 billion in assets to preparing welcome packets. The demotion was so transparent it was almost insulting that they thought I wouldn't recognize it for what it was. I'll need time to consider this transition, I said, rising from my chair. Of course, Carson nodded, relief evident in his expression. Take the weekend. We'll expect your decision on Monday. As I exited the glass-walled conference room, I caught sight of Vanessa Chen, Carson's executive assistant, quickly averting her eyes. The pity in her expression told me everything. This transition was common knowledge throughout the office before I'd even been informed. I spent the weekend methodically reviewing my options, weighing 2 decades of loyalty against the blatant age discrimination now facing me. By Sunday evening, my decision was made. Monday morning, I walked into Carson's office with my resignation letter. This is disappointing, Margaret, he said, not sounding disappointed at all. We were hoping you'd embrace this new chapter. I've decided to embrace a different one, I replied calmly. I'll complete the standard 2-week notice period to ensure a smooth transition for my clients. Carson shifted, suddenly uncomfortable. Actually, for senior positions like yours, immediate separation is standard protocol. HR will assist with your exit today. Of course, they weren't even going to allow me to say goodbye to clients I'd worked with for decades, some of whom I'd known through marriages, divorces, children's graduations, and retirement planning. I understand, I said, though I understood far more than Carson realized. Vanessa appeared at the door, clearly assigned to escort me through the humiliating process of clearing out my desk under supervision. To her credit, she looked genuinely distressed by the task. I'll give you some privacy, Carson said, standing to leave his own office rather than witness the uncomfortable scene. Once alone with Vanessa, I smiled reassuringly. It's all right. This isn't your fault. It's not right, she whispered, glancing toward the door. Everyone knows it's not about technology. Aiden's been promising the board he can double the returns on the premium portfolios with his algorithmic trading system. This was new information. Has he demonstrated these returns? Vanessa hesitated. He showed them projections, very impressive ones. But between us, I've seen some of the preliminary results. They don't match his claims. Interesting. Thank you for telling me, Vanessa. As we walked to my office, I noticed Aiden had already moved into the adjacent corner office, formerly occupied by Robert Sullivan before his own mysterious early retirement 3 months ago. Through the glass walls, I could see him on the phone, gesturing enthusiastically as he spoke. Packing 23 years into a single cardboard box proved surprisingly simple. Family photos, A few awards, my favorite fountain pen. The truly valuable things, my knowledge, relationships, and reputation, couldn't be packed away so easily. As I prepared to leave, I opened my desk drawer and removed a small leather notebook. Inside were handwritten notes on every major client I'd managed, their children's names, anniversaries, personal milestones, investment preferences, and risk tolerances. Information too personal for the company's CRM system, but essential for the kind of personalized service that had built my reputation. Vanessa watched as I placed it in my box. "They're supposed to get all client materials," she said quietly. "This is personal," I replied. "Just notes to myself over the years." She nodded, understanding perfectly. At 57, I had not planned to leave the workforce for at least another decade. I had savings, yes, but not enough to maintain my lifestyle indefinitely. More importantly, I wasn't ready to stop working. My mind was sharp, my energy high, and my knowledge of investment strategies more comprehensive than most of the younger analysts who relied heavily on algorithms they didn't fully understand. 3 days after my abrupt departure from Westfield Financial, I received a call from James Miller, my largest former client, whose portfolio alone had generated over $3 million in management fees for the firm annually. "Margaret, what the hell is going on?" "I got a call from some kid named Aiden telling me he's taking over my accounts." "Hello, James. Yes, Westfield is making some organizational changes. Aiden Nichols is very capable." "Cut the corporate speak, Margaret. We've known each other for 15 years. Did you quit? Were you fired? What happened?" I sighed. Officially, I resigned. Unofficially, I was given the choice between a glorified administrative position or leaving. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. James Miller had built his fortune in commercial real estate through shrewd assessment of value and opportunity. He recognized a forced exit when he heard one. "This Aiden person told me of some proprietary algorithm that's going to revolutionize my returns." Sounded like a sales pitch for a timeshare. "Is he any good?" "He has an impressive educational background," I said carefully. James laughed. "That's the most diplomatic non-answer I've ever heard. What are you doing now?" "I'm exploring options." "Have lunch with me tomorrow." The usual place, 12:30. The following day, over seafood at the Capitol Grill. James listened as I explained the situation at Westfield in more detail. His expression darkened when I mentioned Aiden's promises of doubled returns. "That's not just aggressive, it's irresponsible," he said, setting down his fork. "No legitimate investment strategy can guarantee those kinds of returns without corresponding risk." I agree, but the board was apparently quite impressed with his projections. James studied me for a moment. "You know, Margaret, I don't work with Westfield Financial. I work with you. Always have." "I appreciate that, James, but—" "No buts. I've been thinking about this since we spoke yesterday. My family office has grown significantly over the past 5 years. We've been using 3 different advisory firms, which is inefficient. I'd like to consolidate under someone I trust." I stared at him, processing his implication. "Are you offering me a job?" "Better. I'm offering you a business. Initial funding to establish your own independent advisory firm, with my portfolio as your first client. Complete autonomy, your name on the door, and a stake in the growth." My heart raced. That's extraordinarily generous, but there are regulatory requirements, registrations, compliance frameworks. All manageable. James waved his hand dismissively. "I have a team of attorneys who can handle the paperwork. The question is, do you want to build something of your own, or are you ready to retire?" The answer was obvious. 2 months later, Montgomery Wealth Advisors opened its doors in a modest but elegant office suite 3 blocks from Westfield Financial. With James Miller's portfolio as our cornerstone and his connections providing warm introductions, we secured 4 additional high-net-worth clients within the first month. I hired Vanessa Chen as my chief operating officer after she reached out to congratulate me on the new venture. Her insider knowledge of Westfield's operations proved invaluable, particularly regarding their client communication deficiencies that we could improve upon. Aiden's algorithmic trading system isn't performing as projected, she informed me during our weekly strategy meeting, 6 months after our launch. The Miller portfolio would have been down 7% last quarter if James hadn't pulled it before implementation. "How do you know this?" I asked, though I had my suspicions. Vanessa smiled. "I still have friends at Westfield. Carson's new assistant is my roommate's sister. We don't need to focus on Westfield's problems. I reminded her, though I couldn't help feeling a twinge of satisfaction. Our growth strategy stands on its own merits. And grow we did. By our 9-month milestone, Montgomery Wealth Advisors managed over $800 million in assets. Our personalized approach, transparent fee structure, and consistent performance attracted clients disillusioned with the increasingly automated services offered by larger firms. The situation at Westfield, meanwhile, had deteriorated significantly. Aiden's algorithmic trading strategy had failed to deliver the promised returns, resulting in substantial losses for several key accounts. The board, initially enamored with his tech-forward approach, had grown increasingly concerned about client retention. I wasn't particularly surprised when Carson Phillips requested a meeting. What did surprise me was his suggestion that we meet at his office rather than mine. For old time's sake, he explained over the phone, his attempt at conviviality falling flat. Curiosity overcame my reluctance. The following Tuesday, I walked into Westfield Financial for the first time since my departure. The familiar logo, a stylized OU in brushed metal, still dominated the reception area, but something felt different. The energy was subdued, the usual bustle replaced with an atmosphere of tension. Vanessa had declined to accompany me, citing too many unpleasant memories. In her place, I brought Daniel Rivera, our legal counsel and a former SEC enforcement attorney whose presence would ensure the meeting remained strictly professional. Carson greeted us with forced enthusiasm, ushering us into the same conference room where he had informed me of my transition nearly a year earlier. His once impeccable appearance showed subtle signs of strain, a slightly looser collar, faint shadows under his eyes. "Margaret, you're looking well," he began, settling into his chair. "Entrepreneurship clearly agrees with you." "Thank you, Carson. I'm finding it rewarding. This is Daniel Rivera, our general counsel." Carson nodded tersely at Daniel before continuing. "I'll get right to the point. The board has authorized me to discuss a potential acquisition of Montgomery Wealth Advisors by Westfield Financial." I kept my expression neutral despite my astonishment. "An acquisition? We're not for sale, Carson. Everyone has a price," he replied with the smug confidence that had always characterized his negotiations. "We're prepared to make a very generous offer, 3 times annual revenue, plus retention bonuses for key personnel, including yourself." Daniel and I exchanged glances. The valuation was indeed generous, excessive even. Something wasn't adding up. Why would Westfield want to acquire a firm less than a year old? I asked directly. Carson's smile tightened. "Your client roster is impressive. We recognize the value of those relationships. The same relationships you were eager to reassign when I was at Westfield." He shifted uncomfortably. "Market conditions have evolved. The board is recalibrating our approach to high net worth client services." Translation: Aiden's algorithmic strategy had failed, clients were fleeing, and they needed my relationships to stop the bleeding. "What happened with the digital investment platform?" I asked innocently. I understood it was the future of the firm. Carson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "We're taking a more balanced approach now. Technology complementing personal service, not replacing it." "And Aiden? How is he adapting to this balanced approach?" "Aiden has decided to pursue other opportunities," Carson replied stiffly. "So they fired him. Interesting." "Carson," I said, leaning forward slightly, "I appreciate Westfield's interest, but Montgomery Wealth Advisors isn't for sale. We've established our independence for specific reasons, and our clients value that independence. The offer is substantial, Margaret. At least take time to consider it." Daniel interjected smoothly. "We'll need any acquisition proposal in writing, with complete terms and conditions for proper evaluation." Carson nodded, relief evident in his expression. He clearly hadn't expected immediate acceptance but had feared outright rejection. "Of course. I'll have the documentation prepared." As we prepared to leave, Carson walked us toward the elevator. In the hallway, we passed Robert Sullivan, my former colleague who had retired before me. He was carrying a banker's box similar to the one I had used when leaving. "Robert," I said, genuinely surprised. "I thought you retired." He smiled grimly. "Unretired briefly. Carson asked me to come back 3 months ago to help stabilize some client relationships. As of today, I'm re-retiring." Carson looked distinctly uncomfortable. Robert has been tremendously helpful during our transitional period. I'll bet, I replied, understanding perfectly what had happened. After forcing out experienced advisors like Robert and myself, then watching Aiden's strategies fail, they desperately tried to bring back the old guard to salvage client relationships. Now that those relationships were stabilized, they were discarding Robert again. In the elevator,